Yeah, this question from Emil4 on X. Bodø Glimt showed their quality by winning against Man City. So will they feel like they've missed an opportunity to go further in the Champions League?
Technically, I think they still can. I'm not certain. They're on 6 points. 24th place is currently on 8 points. I haven't mathsed out all of the possible implications. I don't know if it's possible that it's not because of other results. I think technically they still could. Certainly, unlikely. I'm struggling with this one because on the one hand, obviously, you win a game like that, as well as they played, they completely deserved to beat Man City. You might think, oh, we're capable of more. But I also think, which would you rather, as a team that had never won a Champions League game before? Would you prefer to have come into this group stage, maybe gotten a couple of results against the less eye-catching teams, make it through, scrape through the last 16 and then lose a game against, I don't know, even a team like Atalanta, to pull a name out, who are very good team who've won the Europa League before, but aren't necessarily that like glamour tie that you were dreaming of when you went into the Champions League? Or would you rather, for your first Champions League win, have it be Man City, have it be Erling Haaland coming back and getting beaten, having this moment in the middle of your off season, which is, I don't think it's being patronising or rude to say that Bodø Glimt were never going to win the Champions League. So this is as highlight of a highlight moment as I think you could reasonably ask for in this season with this team, which has a wage bill that is, it's been reported at around 9 million euros gross. I haven't double checked that figure. If someone from Bodø wants to tell me that that's way off on their wages, I'm sorry, but that's what it's been reported as. If that's accurate, there are individual players in the Champions League earning more than that, and some at Manchester City. So to me, of course, when you see this romantic moment, you want them to keep going. You want to see how far the journey can go. And again, they can get to 9 points. 9 points is more than 24th at the moment. So maybe it is even still possible. But I think for this season, to me, this almost feels like a perfect culmination of it all. Get that win and then come back and it's not like the story's over. They've been beating big teams for several years now. They beat Mourinho's Roma, they beat Porto. This is a team that's clearly, at least at the moment, on this trajectory under Knutsen. So why shouldn't they have the aspiration of next year coming back and doing it? But I don't think that it's going to be some campaign they look back on with regret. I think it's going to be a campaign they look back on and go, do you remember that campaign? That's the one when we beat Man City.
Now, they've had the little talk up now. I think I'm going to bring a dose of brutal reality to this. On what they could have won while the dartboard was turning on bullseye, because the fact is, the back end of this year and the start really didn't go to plan, because not only did they miss out on the Champions League, I'm going to do that again. Not only did they miss out on the Norwegian title by 1 point to Viking Stavanger, which means they're going to have to go from like the bottom of the qualifying rounds to get themselves in a position where they can repeat this again, and it will not be easy. So it's not given that they're going to be back in this competition last year. In terms of the way they played, I think they've made the most of this maiden participation in the Champions League. In terms of the results they've got, and in terms of the particular advantage they have of playing at home in an environment that just absolutely spins out a load of teams. And, you know, Nicky talked about it before with those results against Mourinho's Roma, for example. And you could argue that they'll never get to a point higher than snowballing Mourinho in the future, no matter what they do. I think they had an opportunity in all of those home games. Like, they were 2-0 up against Tottenham and let the lead slip. They were winning against Juventus, although I think that's slightly different because Kenan Yildiz just took them to bits in the second half of that, and he was brilliant, and Juventus should have won it before they won it. And then the game against Monaco that they narrowly lost, and they could have got something out of as well. So if they end up like not making the top 24 by a point or 3 points, they have every reason to regret it. I think, especially with how much they're able to make their home a fortress. And this just really underlined how they could have done it.
But that I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head of why this is such a challenging campaign. The home advantage is their advantage. That is absolutely it. But look at the teams they got drawn to play at home. They got Man City. Well, it turns out they beat Man City, but you can't have said that was ever on the board as that's a winnable game. That's just a game they won because they had the best night in the club's history. Tottenham at home. Again, as much as I like to poke fun at Tottenham while Dotun's around, that's a Premier League team. We're talking wildly different financial realities. Now, you're right, Andy, they were 2-0 up, so you can have some kicking yourself about that. And then you played Juventus, who are, again, you said they had a chance in that game. I agree with your assessment. I think Juventus probably should have won it before they did. Juventus, this was post Spalletti in Juventus. So it was the good Juventus, not the bad Juventus who were around early in the season. Again, financial realities. Really, I think of all those home games, the one where I think there's maybe some fair reason for regret is Monaco, who we talked about on the Moan Show this week and have been a bit of a mess this season. So
I mean, they're 4 hard home games, aren't they, on paper? There's no doubt about that. Yeah,
they got to play Slavia Prague away from home. If Slavia Prague was a home game, sure, I would look at that and say, yeah, they should probably win that. But I don't think you can look at those games and say, those are games they should have won particularly.
And the other point we can make is in terms of progress, I suppose, because I went to the first leg of the semi-final in the Europa League. And bear in mind, they were Europa League semi-finalists last year, which is an incredible achievement in itself for a club of this size, even though they built a mini empire up there in the last 5 or 6 years. That they were so far off it against not a great Tottenham team in that semi-final. So for them to make up the ground to be competitive in the Champions League, even if they haven't quite managed it, it's a hell of an achievement.
And this question from Ben on Instagram: did Barcelona's loss against Real Sociedad express their vulnerability, or are they still perceived as the favourites to win La Liga?
I think they have to be the favourites still, Dotun. There's no doubt about that. And it feels to me that rather than, even though Real Madrid have made up some of that 4-point gap at the weekend, now only 1-point gap at the top of the league, of course, I don't feel that's a really fair reflection of how much better Barcelona are than them. But bear in mind, off the back of the Clásico, they reeled off 9 La Liga wins in a row, leading up to this. And it's felt all the time that Real Madrid have been 4 points adrift, that they have been, rather than looking like they're making up those 4 points, it's looked more like that they're hanging on to those 4 points and keeping the gap as small as possible. Although, like, the way we look at that might be partly affected by the absence of Kylian Mbappe at the very start of the calendar year. But I would say that this is a very particular defeat. Like, Barcelona often have a rough old time in the Basque Country, and it's one of the places where they get a fairly hostile reception. Also, I think they look back on this and think everything that did go wrong could go wrong, really. Certainly in terms of they had 3 goals disallowed, loads of other chances. But I think the main thing that this underlined for me is if they are to be as successful as they want to be this season, Rafinha has to be there. The bit where Rafinha comes back in the team, you were talking in the last question, Nicky, about there is a before Spalletti and after Spalletti for Juventus. I think you can look at Rafinha's injury in the first part of this season when he was out for a number of weeks. And the minute he comes back, he's ready. And he transforms the team. He transforms not just what they're able to do on the pitch, but how they carry themselves, really. He's such an influential character in the dressing room. He's almost Hansi Flick on the pitch for them as well. He's one of those players who, as we spoke about in Thursday's show, he's one of those players who has really been semi-transformed by Flick with a little positional adjustment as well. And he's one of the very best footballers in the world. So I think sometimes when we look at Barcelona, we can focus a lot on Lamine Yamal and Pedri, who, by the way, is out injured and for a number of weeks, and that is going to affect them going forward. So who knows how the Spanish title race and maybe even the Champions League is going to go next. But I think sometimes it can be overlooked just how important Rafinha is, and I felt that in this game.
Yeah, I mean, the question from Ben was, did the Real Sociedad expose their vulnerability or are they still the perceived favourites? And I think my answer was just yes. I mean, those things aren't opposed. Those things can both be true.
No.
They have got vulnerabilities. I don't know if Sociedad's the first time we've realised them. Those things are there. But as you say, Andy, I mean, that was a particular game. I think their XG was something close to 4 goals. The Yamal goal in particular that got disallowed. I mean, it's a fraction of his heel. It's one of those things. It doesn't mean it's a wrong decision, but it's one of those things that in football sometimes you're going to get unlucky and miss the fine margins. It wasn't like they had some atrocious performance. And in even one of the players who came out of that, I think, getting a bit of criticism, Dani Olmo, goes and scores an absolute belter in the Champions League in midweek to remind you he's not suddenly a bad player. So I think both things can be true. They are a team with vulnerabilities. But their main rival in La Liga are Real Madrid. And I don't think any of us would say that Real Madrid, who have just changed manager and who we talked about on the main show as being a team of some brilliant individuals, is necessarily a team without vulnerabilities either. So for me, Barcelona are still the favourites, but it's not like there's some gulf between them and it's impossible that Madrid could get ahead of them.
Here's a question from Finn on email. Is Marseille the best place for Ethan Nwaneri to develop? Let's go to Nicky first for that one.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had a big conversation, didn't we, about Roberto De Zerbi on the main show this week, and I think certainly he has a well-earned reputation for understanding forwards, for knowing how to help forwards score goals. Specifically, that's his maybe his greatest asset. De Zerbi as a coach, he understands what it takes to create the openings for strikers to score, and he understands how to help strikers read the pitch and make those runs. So I think in that regard, it's a promising fit. And I think also this is now becoming quite an established connection between Marseille and Arsenal. We've seen, I think the standout example is William Saliba going there and coming back and really establishing himself as one of the absolute best centre-backs in the Premier League and perhaps in the world. But when Guendouzi went there, Tavares went there, they've loaned players out there before and they've been pretty happy overall with the results. So I think it doesn't mean there's some magic fix, but I think that Nwaneri was not getting the game time at Arsenal, and I think there are certainly worse places he could go in terms of coaching situation and opportunity.
I think when you look at it from the outside, Dotun, there are questions over where he fits in the team. I mean, we know he's not going to play right-sided forward because Mason Greenwood's got that locked up. And so that says to you that Nwaneri is going to develop in more of a midfield role. Now, if you look at him as a potential rival to or cover for Martin Odegaard in seasons to come, maybe that's a good thing. I think the other thing is looking at how Roberto De Zerbi is going to see him. That's the important thing, because De Zerbi throughout this season has said, and he's not one of those coaches who moans about his lot that much. He's been pleased generally with the amount of assistance he's received from Mehdi Benatia and Pablo Longoria, his president. He's been pleased with the players they've brought in. But he's always said throughout this season, what I'm really missing is a number 10. I really want a number 10. So that, to me, says that Nwaneri is going to play in this spot. And if I was him, I'd be very excited by that. Now, what we know about two things about Mikel Arteta. One particular to this situation, which is he is the driver behind this loan move, because it seems there was some opposition to Nwaneri going away and they felt he should continue to work with the Arsenal first team. And Arteta went, well, hang on a minute. Actually, I want him to get his reps in. I think this is the right place for him to go. And the other thing that we have to know more widescreen about Arteta is him and De Zerbi aren't the same or even that similar in a lot of ways. But what they do have is a similar view of how football is played, Nicky. And I think for him to trust such an important future player to Arsenal, he thinks, as you were sort of touching on before, De Zerbi is the guy who can really open Nwaneri up and take him to that next level.
Yeah, perhaps that's even a reflection of Arteta, who, of course, and I don't mean this to be a criticism of Arteta, because Arteta is in the process of trying to help Arsenal win the biggest trophies, which is a demand that is going to pull a lot of his attention in all different directions. He maybe feels that he and his coaching staff haven't been able to put that time into helping Nwaneri maximise his development. And as you say, he's the one been leading this push. And it's almost outsourcing that. It's almost saying, if we can not right now, when we're just focused on winning right now, do the best job that we think we maybe could do with this player's development, if he could be somewhere else playing games and also with a coaching staff who will have the time as well as the inclination to work on him with that stuff. Although I suppose the counter to that is, I believe this is what in Italian they would call un prestito secco, a dry loan. There is no option to buy for Marseille at the end of it. So there is always that question with that kind of loan of what is the incentive for the loaning team to put the maximum into players' development if they know that he's not going to be staying there long term.
Let me just say, Nicky Bandini forced me to say this. Nevertheless, it's worth the listen. If you love your Arsenal or you're interested, you follow the football, we've got a new podcast out called The Thing About Arsenal. It's our sister podcast, and I direct you there, even if you're on the other side of North London. There'll be lots to pick up on. And if you want to know what's happening to Ethan Nwaneri, well, The Thing About Arsenal is where to look. Find it wherever you get your podcasts, and not least here on OTC. This question from Andrew on email: what do you guys make of Marc-André ter Stegen joining Girona on loan? Is this really the best platform for him to fight for the Germany World Cup squad? And is there any way back for him in Hansi Flick's side?
So if I could answer that like in sequential order, interesting, yes and no. I'm going to add some flesh onto that, don't worry. This has been brewing for a while that is going to go to Girona, and there are reasons for this. In terms of his personal situation, it means he can stay with his children who are at school in Catalonia. And I think sometimes we forget footballers are human beings, and this is something that's really important to them. He doesn't particularly want to go anywhere at the moment. He's been in Barcelona, bear in mind, for nearly 12 years. So this is a huge thing for him. I think in terms of him being able to get to a team where he can just play, that's really important. We know he's going to be able to go to Girona and just get reps. I think that's massively important, especially when you consider the long time that he's been out. You know, he's a much better goalkeeper than Paulo Gazzaniga, and he will play the games when he's fit and ready to do so. And obviously, because he's been in cold storage for such a long time with that injury and having not really playing one Copa del Rey game, that they need to know that he's fit to play. And you know, it's a massive upgrade on what Girona have got, so it's great for them. And if he's to have any chance of reaching the Germany World Cup squad, he's got to play the games. In terms of, is there any way back for him in Hansi Flick's side? Like I said, no. There's no chance. They bought Joan Garcia to be their present, medium term and long term as well. Ter Stegen was massively put out by this, was reduced to the status of third choice goalkeeper, part of the reason they re-signed Wojciech Szczesny, of course. And you can't have a goalkeeper who's third choice, who was previously someone who's massively influential in the dressing room, earning the amount of money that he's earning. He is someone who they desperately need to get off the books. And it seems that Girona are paying 5% of his wages. That's how much they need to get him out of the building, not just for financial reasons, but for political equilibrium reasons as well. So it's very unlikely he'll be at Barcelona next year. But if he is, he won't be in the team.
And Nagelsmann's quite pointedly refused to commit to Baumann definitely being the starter for the World Cup. And he's kind of trying to keep the door open for Ter Stegen. You go to a club that I think has conceded literally the most goals in La Liga so far this season. So you're going to be facing some shots. And Nagelsmann kind of said quite openly, I think, at the end of last year, like, he doesn't need to be the top club. He kind of questioned this whole idea of what a top club even is. He just needs to be playing games. So this is a situation where he's going to get to play games. Whether or not he'll play well enough, that's up to him to prove. But I think it's definitely a better situation for him than not playing games explicitly from the German point of view.
Here's an interesting question. This is from Tariq Mark on Instagram. What does Juventus's interest in Jean-Philippe Mateta say about the quality of their current choice of strikers, Nicky?
It says that they need more strikers, is what it says. Pretty obviously, and pretty nakedly, that's true, right? I mean, Dusan Vlahovic is injured at the moment. Even if we put aside the fact that he's never really, in all the time he's been there, lived up to the 70 million euro fee that he came in for. He's just not available right now, and I think he's not expected back until March at the earliest. And at that point, he's going to have about 3 months left on his contract. He's going to be heading out the door in the summer, so. Vlahovic is unlikely to feature much more for Juventus before he leaves. Openda, who, as I alluded to on the main show, I think at one point, was being cuffed around the back of the head by Spalletti before he even got sent on in their Champions League game. He really hasn't had the sort of impact there that anyone's hoping for at all. And that leaves Jonathan David, who I think Jonathan David might be beginning to come good, actually. He had that missed penalty against Lecce, which was one of those stories that for whatever reason went very viral, and everyone was saying, oh, it's the worst penalty anyone's ever taken. Honestly, it was a bad penalty, but I felt like the reaction to it was really overblown. Like, we've never seen someone take a bad Panenka before. Like, it was a bad Panenka. You've seen them before. He's actually pretty good from the penalty spot through his career, Jonathan David. So it was clearly an exception. But if you look since then, I think in 4 games, he's got 2 goals and 2 assists. And he had a bit of a stinker against Cagliari, but I'd say he was good in all the other ones. So I think they have one striker who's coming good. But even if Jonathan David comes good, that's going to be one striker. And this is a team trying to compete in the Champions League, trying to compete to finish in the top 4, at least in Serie A. I think the title is beyond them, but they at least want to qualify for the Champions League again. So they need another forward. And Mateta's scored goals in the Premier League. Why couldn't he score goals in Serie A?
Yeah, it's not just a forward either. It's a certain type of centre forward, isn't it? And there are not a lot of those sort of centre forwards about. And it's why I think Mateta will get in the France World Cup squad, despite the fact, ever since he's made his France debut, there's been a huge part of French football discourse that has said, what's the point in him playing? Once everyone's fit, he's not going to be in the France squad. And I disagree with that, because I think he's in the Olivier Giroud spot. Like, there is no striker that France have that is quite like him at the moment that gives you that direct option, as well as having been incredibly consistent in the Premier League over the last couple of years, outstripping all expectations. So I can definitely understand why Juventus are interested, especially, Milik doesn't even register for most people now, because he's been out injured the whole time, hasn't he? It's been really unfortunate, but he was their sort of semi-budget option to do that sort of role. And when you look at how few of those type of strikers there are in the market generally, I don't know about you, Nicky, I've spent a lot of the last 5-6 weeks looking at Scamacca going, oh God, he's so good, isn't he? He does everything you want. If he hadn't have already gone and failed at West Ham and had an ACL, and I know those are 2 quite big caveats, people will be talking about him all over, because he does so much, so well of what's required of that kind of striker. And I think the interesting thing with Mateta and a potential Juventus transfer. I've never believed it was really possible because Juventus just want a loan with an option to buy. And if you're Palace, why would you do that when he's such a valuable player? What they do have is they have striker collateral. So I think if you're Palace, and maybe this transfer's already happened or Mateta's gone somewhere else by the time you've listened to this and this is all completely irrelevant. But the way I'm looking at it now is if you're Palace, you have an opportunity to extract a really good replacement from what Juventus have got and what is not really working for them at the moment. So they had a little ask about Jonathan David, didn't they? And presumably everyone feels a lot better about that Panenka in the wake of what happened to Brahim Diaz last weekend. But I think when you look at those strikers that are on the rack at Juventus, if I'm Palace, I'm thinking, oh, wouldn't mind a bit of Lois Openda. Look at the goals he scored in the Bundesliga. Look at the goals he scored in Liga. Look at the fact that he's still at a good age, that he's mobile, that he's versatile. Just because he's not really worked for Juventus so far, I'm throwing my hat in the ring for him if I'm Palace. And if that is the condition of a Mateta deal, that takes Juventus closer towards what they want, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think that's a really fair analysis. I think there's lots of fascinating stuff for the Juventus centre forwards at the moment. I'm hugely intrigued to see what the market is for Dusan Vlahovic this summer, because he's going to go somewhere. And I think exactly as you just said, Andy, certain kinds of striker are hard to come by, and he looks the part, Vlahovic, but in several years at Juventus he never quite delivered to that point. So yeah, lots of intrigue in that position.
Does he scream Barcelona bargain to you?
Oh, could do. That would be an interesting fit.
Well, and just out of interest for my sake, Nicky, I know it's not about Ask Dotun, it's Ask OTC, but from what Andy said about the type of striker that Mateta is, and I totally agree, the type of centre forward he is, they don't make him like they used to as often as they used to once upon a time. How well do you think that type of striker, direct, slightly bully boy striker, will do in Serie A?
I think he absolutely can do well. I think, Andy invoked Olivier Giroud. We've seen Giroud was hugely successful in Serie A with Milan. But I think it's really always with players. To me, it's much more about the fit on a particular team than it is in the league. And I think that it would be a change from what they've been doing, because I actually think Spalletti has been, again, gradually getting better and better out of Jonathan David. And I think that dynamic is starting to work. And Mateta would be a very different thing. Having said that, Juventus go through Kenan Yildiz. Yildiz is the present and the future of where that team is trying to be. And Yildiz is a number 10. And I think there's lots and lots of past examples we could pull up of a little Yildiz-esque number 10 playing off a classic number 9 and working out very well. So I could see him being a good fit there.
It's now time for our Game of the Week. Each week we recommend a game for you to watch at the weekend, and just as importantly, we also suggest the food you should be having with it. So Andy, what are you kicking off with this week?
I've gone to northern France for Saturday's game between Le Havre and Monaco. Now, we spoke in Thursday's show about Monaco, and you'll want your popcorn. I mean, that could be my suggested food, to be honest.
Sweet or salty?
I think it might be salty after the back of that 6-1 defeat at Real Madrid, but look, Monaco are in a right old state, and this is a really difficult task for them because, I mean, Le Havre have been better since the turn of the year. I really like Didier Digard as a coach. Of course, was over in England with Middlesbrough as a player, came out of the PSG Academy in a completely different era. He's a really cerebral coach, getting by on minuscule means, unlike Monaco. And I think he's going to make it really difficult for them. Of course, they've just signed Sofiane Boufal as well, an interesting name from French and English football past. So interesting to see if he gets a start in this game. Monaco can't let any points go really from now on if they're to get themselves back into it. Spoiler alert, they're not going to get themselves back into the Champions League race. It's just not happening. So I think off the back of that, what we will be enjoying is good, honest French football fare. Now, what you get when you go to the football of France, you don't get hot dog and chips as such. The version of that is you get merguez frites. And merguez, if you're not aware, are those sort of lamb sausages. If you try and cook them at home, they will almost certainly set your kitchen on fire. I've been told. And I just love it as keeping the cold out, sort of French football bouffe.
It's a relief that we're not just going to eat the popcorn, I've got to say, Nicky, and I know you can do better than that, but let's talk the football first of all. What are you going for as a game for us to watch this weekend?
It was so hard this week, Dotun, because it's Juventus-Napoli is at 5:00 on Sunday, but I've gone with Roma against Milan, which is right after that on Sunday at 7:45. The two games back-to-back, you've got fifth against third and then fourth against second, which is a pretty tasty evening in Serie A on Sunday. But I'm going with Roma against Milan. Part of that is because, as we talked about on the main show this week, Daniel Mahlen was so good on his debut. I just wanted to see more of it. I wanted to see if that was a one-off or whether or not Roma have fixed this issue that they have. Partly because right now Milan are the closest rivals to Inter, and Inter are, despite the fact that they just systematically cannot beat any of their direct rivals, they are just starting to look to me like they might pull away. They're starting to, just the sheer consistency of beating everyone else except for their direct rivals has given them that 3-point lead at the top. And I think if Milan were to lose this one, it might just open up that window for Inter to start pulling off. So big game for Milan, big, proof. Second proof for Marlon and that Roma attack, but they have Juventus breathing down their necks. It's just a really fascinating weekend all around for those for the title race and for the top four race in Italy. To eat, I'm going to go with gnocchi alla romana. People will hear gnocchi and they'll think of the little dumplingy, potatoey things. This is something quite different, actually. Gnocchi alla romana is starts with almost like a savoury custard of milk and egg, and then you tip a bunch of semolina flour into that, and it turns into almost like a mash type consistency, and then it all goes into a baking dish and gets baked, and it almost comes out looking almost like a savoury bread pudding, but it's delicious and warming and hearty. To keep Andy mentioned something that was hot with the merguez. Andy has been, listeners don't know, freezing a bit during this episode, so I'm just trying to help Andy stay warm through the winter.
Appreciated.
And thank you. So we've got, I think I'll have one of each food, so I may as well watch both matches as well. So that's 7:45, Roma versus Milan, and Le Havre versus Monaco is on Saturday at 6 p.m. That's it from us. Thank you for listening to Ask OTC, and if you'd like to ask a question, you can contact us at any time at OTC Pod, and you can also email us otc@footballramble.com.